Hello everyone, and yes, yet again today we are talking about Buster Blader, but we're talking about the previous build that we were initially covering on the channel, and its differences, nuances, and how it has grown in the new metagame as well. I'll be honest, since the release of Flounderies and such, I actually hadn't gone back to this version of the deck for quite a while, because I've been having a lot of fun with the Rose Synchro version. So I decided, people were asking me in the comments in the last video, which one's better. I was saying, I prefer the Rose Synchro version. Then I realized that it's not fair of me to say that since I haven't given this one a chance in the latest metagame. After playing both, again refreshed, and this is an updated list. Initially, we had like Max C and stuff in here. We weren't playing 3 Emperor and 3 Effect Wheeler. Duel number 2, you'll see, is the reason why I bumped these guys up to 3. Because I did not deserve that win, but it's a pretty funny game. We're going to watch it nonetheless. After playing them again in the new metagame, I have to say I do prefer the Rose Synchro version. Purely because at times this version of it can be a bit slower. For example, you don't have a dragon monster in your graveyard nearly as consistently as the other version, because the only dragon you're really playing is the Buster Whelp. Now you will have this in your graveyard most of the time, because if you don't get it naturally, you can always search it through your Crystron Hulk. So it's not necessarily a difficult to reach card, but in the other version of the deck, it's not even necessary. It's just an extra. So you don't as consistently have a dragon in the graveyard, so you're not as consistent with the actual Buster Blader combo. But being able to just open up with Fusion Destiny and using your Tenyi monsters to constantly make Predaplant Verte Anaconda available to you is also a massive boon. So I think the two decks, I don't think one is better than the other. I think they're both very, very powerful and they're both very, very fun. I do prefer the other one because I don't like playing bricks. You've got 2 extra bricks in here in the form of Celestial and Dasher. Fusion Destiny itself, after an initial usage, can also be seen as a brick, but opening up with this card is insane. It is so strong. And the rest of the deck, we also do kind of have the Baron de Fleur Mega Phantom Beast Auroradon combo. We have a very simplified version of it. You would just summon Auroradon, 3 tokens, level 1 tuner into Baron de Fleur. Again, if you're playing a deck that naturally plays a lot of tuners or non-tuners, you'd be an idiot not to play the engine. Again, I'm sorry to anyone who doesn't want to hear that. It's just silly not playing it. It's just silly. That's it. So yeah, this is the deck here. Again, slight alterations after the last video. We bumped Vishuda up by 1 by taking out Ashuna. It just wasn't cutting it. Mapora, we also cut because it just wasn't making as big an impact as the others. Ash Blossom took its place, so we were running a third Ash. Running these because of Flounderies, of course. We've talked about that in previous videos. I'm going to do a card-by-card breakdown at the end of the video, where we'll break down each individual engine and card and explain why it's there. For now, we're just going to get into the game, so if you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, if you have any suggestions about this deck or any others that you've seen or want to see, feel free to leave it in the comments and subscribe to keep on top of future videos. Again, it doesn't cost you anything and it really does help me out, so I would appreciate it. And that's pretty much it for me. Let's get into game number 1. Alright, game number 1 here. We're going to be diving into what is essentially your bread and butter broken board for this deck. This is the ideal setup. We special summon out our Adhara just to see what type of hand traps he might have. We grab the trap trick from our Pot of Prosperity. It revealed a few different cards. We were spoiled for choice here. Amazing hand. We grab the trap trick because it can be used for, since we can already search Prologue, we can use trap trick to search for Imperm. We summon out Monk of the Tenyi, which means no effect monsters, summon Vishuda, and then our Whelp. Whelp will grab Prologue, so now we have both Prologue and Trap Trick. We're going to link summon here in the Crystron Hulk to hopefully go into our Baron de Fleur, but that does get interrupted, unfortunately, with the Effect Failure. But again, that's of a little consequence to this deck. The Baron de Fleur is simply an extra card you can go into. So we're going to use the Monk and our Hanky Fibrax to go into the Protector Whelp, which will send the Dragon Buster Destruction Sword to the graveyard. Then we use Fusion Destiny, send our 2 Destiny heroes, summon out DPE, set 2 and pass. Now, with this deck, much like Flounderies, there's my turn and then there's our turn. So in our opponent's draw phase, we're going to use Prologue, send Memories and the Buster Blader to the graveyard, then chain the Memories in the grave like you've seen in all of the other Buster Blader videos. I'll explain this at the end. Banish our materials to Fusion Summon from the graveyard, our Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, and then we special summon the Buster Dragon. The Buster Dragon will then equip onto our Buster Blader the Dragon Buster Destruction Sword from the graveyard, and Trap Trick will activate, grabbing us an Imperm. So we're going to grab Imperm here, and we're also going to equip on our Buster Blader Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. What is this board? This board says your opponent cannot use the effects of their monsters. All of their monsters are swapped to defense. We have a free negate whenever we want. Your opponent cannot use their extra deck, and we can pop any card on the field at our choosing, non-targeting. So this is nuts. Our opponent here opens up with a Harpy's Feather Duster, which you think automatically really, really bad. But in the graveyard, Prologue has a second effect. It can banish itself, which means that until the end of the turn, anything that says Destruction Sword in its name is not destroyed by battle or card effects. So our Whelp will survive. We banish it to protect our Whelp. Our opponent also has Twin Twisters, so he discards a Small World to then pop our Imperm and our Dragon Buster Destruction Sword before it can resolve. So you know what? It does get destroyed. But it took 3 cards out of our opponent's hand just to get rid of 2 of ours. He still can't use any of his monster effects. We still have the ability to pop one, and he realizes he sat there for like 3 minutes trying to like figure out where he went wrong in life. But basically that was game. That is short, sweet game number 1, showing exactly what this deck can accomplish and what it wants to accomplish and how difficult it is to counter. Yes, they destroyed the back row and everything, but it cost them over half of their hand to do it. So they had 2 cards left to play through basically a skill drain and a pop 1, which wasn't going to happen. So that's pretty much it for game number 1. That is the ideal. What we're going to look at now is a couple of longer, funny games where that doesn't necessarily go to plan. So let's get into game number 2. Alright, getting into game number 2. This is the game that convinced me to drop Maxi from the deck entirely. Maxi's a really powerful card, but you're facing Flounderies at least once in every 3 duels. I don't want a card in my deck to be dead 33 or even 25% of the time, so we've cut it for something that will more constantly be live. Our opponent grabs their map here to banish a Robina from the deck. So Robina will be added back to the hand, and Eaglin will allow him a secondary normal summon. The field spell will also allow him a tertiary normal summon. Luckily in our hand we have both Effect Veiler and Ash Blossom. So we're going to Effect Veiler the Eaglin here. So that means the Robina will go back to hand and his Eaglin gets negated, so he does not get the additional summon there, nor does he get to search for the level 7 or higher. Now that's really good because now, without having any banished Flounderies, he cannot chain block his Robina, meaning we can Ash it to stop the additional search and normal summon. So through the combination of Effect Veiler and Ash Blossom, we're able to completely stop them from setting up their board. Phenomenal. Luckily, and at this time as well, we were only playing 1 copy of Vishuda. This is why we bumped Vishuda up as well. We just happened to top deck into Vishuda. Vishuda will special summon itself out to the field, link summon into Monk of the Tenyi. Now Vishuda can banish itself from the grave to return the field spell back to the hand. That means no more summoning for him during our turn. We normal summon Jet Synchron, go into Crystron Haki Fibrax, Hulk activates and gets ashed, unfortunately. But again, not the end of the world, not ideal. The point of this deck is not to show off the Auroradon combo. You already know that, so you've noticed in every game so far it's been negated. So we're going to use Pot of Prosperity, reveal the top 3. We can see the Prologue, but the Prologue is not useful so long as we don't have a dragon in our grave. So we decided to grab the Effect Veiler instead, because it's such a powerful card in this particular matchup. We're going to discard the Maxi from our hand here to resurrect the Jet Synchron from the graveyard, and then we're going to link summon into Predaplant Verte Anaconda. Verte Anaconda, of course, having the ability to summon DPE, so send Fusion Destiny and our materials at the cost of 2000 life to summon our Phoenix Enforcer. Swing in with our Verte Anaconda, swing in with our DPE, of course, with DP reducing all of their attack points by 400, and end turn. So we're in a really, really powerful spot. We have the ability to stop their plays for 1 more turn. Their field spell, of course, that was returned to the hand, we have the ability to simply destroy our own Phoenix Enforcer and their field spell to stop them from getting that additional normal summon and search. DPE, of course, will resurrect itself during our turn. Our opponent goes for the Flounderies, whatever the hell this is, and the Unexplored Winds, shuffles back 2 cards to draw 2 cards, very powerful. He has Stree then. Stree's going to attempt to banish our DPE from the graveyard to stop it from reviving. He also gets an additional normal summon and to bring his other 2 Flounderies back to his hand. That's why we have Effect Veiler. We're going to completely negate that Stree. Stree now does not banish our DPE. and does not get the additional normal summon. And we know 2 of the cards now in his hand are Rabina and Eaglin. Keep track of that information when you're playing against Flounderies. There is only 1 card in his hand that we do not know. That is important information. Keep note of that, because that tells you how cautious you need to be. Moving back into our turn, we go into our standby phase. DPE, of course, comes back to our field. The Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. We top decked into Impermanence, which is insane. Impermanence, of course, being just as powerful as Effective Healer in this particular matchup. Being able to completely shut down our opponent. Now, our opponent used Ash Blossom there to stop our Celestials effect. But that means the only cards in his hand are now the Rabina and the Eagle. We know everything in his hand. That's important. We're going to destroy his monster. DPE will pop itself and the Unexplored Winds past to our opponent. He now has 1 card that we don't know. DPE will come back in the standby phase of every single turn. The grind game is insane. Our opponent top decked in the Pot of Duality, reveal the top 3 of the deck to add 1 to his hand. He grabs another Pot of Duality, I guess because the other cards aren't of any use to him, so we know every card in his hand. So he normal summons Rabina, goes to add Stree back to his hand. We're going to use Infinite Impermanence, negate the Rabina. That means no search and no additional summon. Imperm, Effective Healer, Ash Blossom, that is the kryptonite of Flounderies. Having those 3 cards, this duel is why we bumped them up. Being able to top deck into 2 Effective Healers, we only ran 2, and 1 of our 2 Imperms is insane, and no points for guessing what we top deck next. Another Impermanence. So we're able to stop our opponent for another turn, which is disgusting. We set 1, swing for 25. Our opponent only has 2,500 life points left, so they need to do something this turn. We know every card in their hand, now barring 1. Our opponent has the Pot of Duality from last turn. They're going to look the top 3 of their deck. They're going to grab Terraforming to grab the field spell from the deck of 1 unknown card in their hand. Terraforming will grab the field spell. And then, of course, they will activate the field spell, and we'll chain our DPE, popping itself and popping the field spell. We don't need them getting an additional search. They only have 1 unknown card. They have I believe, the Stree and the Eaglin in their hand still. Summons the Stree. They're going to try and banish DPE yet again. Rabina will add itself back yet again. Imperm onto the Stree, stops the banish, stops the normal summon. Again, we've drawn both of our Veilers and both of our Impermanence. So we couldn't really have gotten much more lucky in this matchup. We had no rights winning this game whatsoever. He swings in for 700. We don't really care about that. End phase comes back around to our turn. We top deck into 1/4/1. We don't even care what card it is, because no matter what, we're simply going to set it. We're going to destroy it with DPE to destroy his monster. That means he's 2,500 life. We have 2,500 attack, and that is game. So we had no rights winning that game. That is the importance of Effective Healer and Imperm in this particular metagame. That's why we dropped Maxi. You don't face Flounderies every game, and I understand Maxi is strong against other decks. It is strong against other decks, but when I'm facing Flounderies once in every at least 3 games, that means 33% of the time Maxi is completely useless, and that's simply not good enough. Again, it's really powerful when it works, but there's so many circumstances in which it doesn't. So we're swapping it for cards that we know are going to work. The only real matchup where Imperm and Effective Healer aren't all that great is Virtual Worlds, potentially. That's about it. In every other circumstance, they're still really, really powerful cards, and they should be respected as such. So that's game number 2. Really, really good game. Really, really lucky win. Let's get into game number 3. Now, moving into game number 3, you may be wondering why I mentioned Virtual Worlds in the last one, because that's exactly what we're playing against next. So our opponent opens up with their emergency teleport. They start going off with their virtual world plays. I don't know this deck as well as I probably should. I know what their end board is, and I know how to beat it. That's the important part. So they have their Mayhem and Kieran on the field here. They're going to send their Chuchi to the graveyard, which I thought was a little bit strange. I thought they would have kept that. So they're going to go into Shen Shen. Going to summon out the Roshi and the Mai again. It's going to end up synchro summoning once again into Cloud Castle. He decreases the level of his Shen Shen to some Cloud Castle. At this point, we're going to Effective Healer. There's not a lot of points at which against Virtual World Effective Healer is actually any good. So trying to find an opportunity to use it that's actually going to have an impact is always useful. He's going to banish his trap card from the graveyard here to resurrect the Shen Shen. And that means he now has 2 level 9s, so he's going to use these 2 to go into the true King of all calamities. Now, what impact did that effectively have? It basically just forced him to use an additional resource, which admittedly isn't the biggest of deals, but it is, every little bit counts. Our opponent has VFD here. He activates. Initially our plan was just during the draw phase to imperm this to stop it from working, because he doesn't have his Chi-Chi to pop it. But we don't need to. We're not activating anything this turn. We have 4 trap cards in our hand, so we're just going to set 4 and pass. Like, we have no need to do anything. So now during the draw phase, we're going to start activating our cards. We're going to start monkey flipping all of our trap cards, flip memories, flip prologue. We needed to flip memories because we didn't have a dragon in the graveyard, so prologue needed to send a dragon, meaning we couldn't send memories. So of course we need this in the graveyard. Easiest way to get it in the grave is by activating it, of course. So we're going to summon out the Buster Dragon and the Buster Blader. Memories, now that it's in the grave, can activate to fusion summon using monsters in the grave into our Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. So we've got this huge 5800 attack monster on the field, and all of his monsters on the field cannot activate their effects. So our opponent's struggling here. This is going to be a difficult one. They try using their Virtual World Gate here to negate us, and we're not going to let that happen. We of course have Imperm set in this column for a reason. We're going to negate that and pass on. Now, you may be wondering, why haven't we used Trap Trick yet? My plan here was to use Trap Trick to grab a second Impermanence. At this time, we're only playing 2. We cannot grab a second Impermanence. I completely forgot I wasn't playing 3 because I'm so used to my Rose Dragon version. So this Trap Trick, I'll be honest, is completely dead. So we're gonna, again, he goes to Exceed Summon into this Virtual World Phoenix, which does nothing really, so swaps back to our turn. We do misplay slightly here. It would have gotten us some extra damage, but it's not game changing. We swing in with our Buster Dragon on our Buster Blader first instead of the big guy. He gets to summon 2 Virtual Worlds from his deck here. We probably should have done that first to get more damage over the King Calamity, but the most important thing was destroying that Calamity. Now remember, if you summon off of your prologue, the Buster Dragon that you summon gets destroyed at the end of the turn, so you need to make a decision on what you're going to do with that. Are you just going to take the L on that resource, or are you going to utilize it? We decide we're going to use it for Verte Anaconda, pay 2k, send our monsters necessary to the graveyard to summon DPE, then we're going to use DPE to pop itself and one of these monsters. We didn't destroy the Gate because Gate of course has a decent graveyard effect, where it can banish itself to search for a Virtual World monster. We don't really want him doing that, but we do want to cut down on the amount of resources he has available. He's going to use his Gate now to try and negate our DPE by banishing from the graveyard. We're going to chain to that to pop our own DPE as well as his last remaining monster, hoping that would slow him down, if even just a little bit. But of course he does have Foolish Burial in his hand, in which case he's able to send the Enchantress to the deck. That's right, this is Adventure Virtual Worlds. Which is interesting. Actually, a couple of turns prior, I was thinking to myself, Virtual Worlds would be really good with the Adventure Engine, and here we see it. So he's going to resummon out his Shen Shen here by banishing 2 monsters from the graveyard with different types and attributes, and now he's got a pretty big beater on the board, but it's just as big as our Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. He does of course have the Draco back, so he's going to be able to use the Draco back in just a moment here to bounce back our Buster Blader. Unfortunately, that is what it is. There's only so much you can prepare against. We flip up our Trap Trick here, just, I don't know, for intimidation, I guess. We're going to set a Prologue from our deck. The idea was, of course, Prologue being a useless card now at this stage. We just wanted to minimize our possibility of drawing into it. We banish the only remaining copy. We banish 1 copy and set the other, which means we cannot top deck into it. He's going to bounce back our Buster Blader, swing in for 23 over our Predaplant Verte Anaconda, and pass back to us. We do draw into Infinite Impermanence, which is a good draw. We summon out our DP once again, which reduces his whole field by 400. We take out the Shen Shen before doing anything else. Then at main phase 2, we set 2 and banish the Celestial from our graveyard in order to try and entice him into using that Griffin Rider. Draw 2, and he didn't use it unfortunately, but that's fine. Now we're in the draw phase. We're going to use DPE to pop. He's going to try and negate us with Griffin Rider, and now we're going to negate the Griffin Rider with Impermanence. The reason we did it in that order, we wanted to not only catch his Griffin Rider but also catch that Virtual World Gate. It also removes any meaningful targets for his Draco back because we're now destroying the token as well as negating the Gate. He normal summons out the Ash Blossom and then resummons a monster here from the graveyard. He's going to go into Baron de Fleur using the level 7 and the level 3. We're going to Ash his search for what I can only assume to be the Enchantress. But again, not that it really matters at this point. Look at his board and look at ours. He has more than enough attack points on board here to take us out. Banishes 2 from the graveyard to summon out his Shen Shen once more. And that is pretty much game. Swings for 28. Returns an Enchantress, I guess, which is an interesting side note, I suppose, about Virtual Worlds. But that is us eliminated. So we tried our best. Like I said, it's not the greatest matchup against Virtual Worlds because they activate primarily from their graveyard, from their hand. They're using face-up spells and traps, which, again, this version of the deck, I believe, handles a little bit better than the other version, especially against continuous cards, because DP can negate them by pumping them before resolution, which is something to consider. So I think this version in particular is better in the Virtual World matchup, going second than the Rose Dragon version. I think the Rose Dragon version is better going first, purely because it can set up like 3-4 negates, which innately would slow down or completely stop their deck in general before you even consider the Buster Blader engine. So rough matchup. What are you going to do? You can't win them all. Let's get into the deck profile. Alright, so moving into the deck profile then, what exactly do we need to know about the deck? I have explained the Buster Blader combo more times than I can probably count on the channel. At 6. We'll briefly cover it again anyway. We're going to break this deck down one engine at a time, so do pay attention. So first of all, we have our Buster Blader engine. So the meaning and point behind the Buster Blader engine is summoning both your Dragon Destroyer Swordsman and your Buster Dragon. So that's your objective. How do you do it? You do it using the trap card Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman. This is the only card you need to make the entire Buster engine work. This is it. This card is the Buster engine. So what does it do? It sends your Buster Blader and one of your Destruction Sword cards to the graveyard to special summon out the Buster Dragon. So that's one of your 2 objectives obtained. And in sending 2 of those materials to the graveyard, you have now almost completed your other. Now, what 2 are you going to send? You're going to send either your Destruction Sword Memories or your Buster Whelp. Or if you already have both of those in the graveyard, you can also send the Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. If you already have the other 2, this is strictly a last resort. Why are you sending these 2 cards to the graveyard? Well, the trap card allows you to banish it as well as materials from your graveyard for a fusion summon. So you banish your Buster Blader and a Dragon monster. This, of course, being the deck's Dragon monster. So if you already have memories in the grave, or if you have the ability to send it to the grave, send your Whelp. If you already have the Whelp, then send the trap card. Whichever one you have, send the other. If you don't have but one of the 2 already in the graveyard, then the Buster combo is not going to work. Don't waste your time deluding yourselves into looking for a way to make it work. Don't half set it up. A Buster Dragon by itself does nothing. So if you don't have the combo, the full combo is in one of these 2 cards already in your graveyard, don't waste your time. But these 2 cards, luckily for us, are both very, very easy to get into the grave. Not only do you have the ability to search them off of very good cards, you know, you've got Pot of Prosperity to help you draw into them. And again, it's one of 5 cards. The Buster Whelp, of course, being able to search out your Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman as well. In a pinch, your Trap Trick can search for your Destruction Sword Memories if you absolutely must. This is also something I can do in the other deck, but I didn't mention it because it happens so rarely that it's not really all that important. But yeah, you'll normally, in most of your games, have one of these 2 cards in the graveyard. If you don't, you're going to need to turn to the rest of the deck in order to tide you over until you do. So what is the rest of the deck? The rest of the deck consists of your Tenyi engine as well as your little Jet Synchron here. So what do the Tenyis do? The Tenyis essentially allow you easy access into some of your key Link monsters. The two main Link monsters, of course, being Crystron Haki Fibrax and Predaplant Verte Anaconda. Those are the main 2, and they're basically the catalyst for what's going to make this deck function outside of its core engine. So Hulk here requires a tuner and a non-tuner. What you will do is, using any of your Tenyi monsters as well as any of your tuners, being your hand traps, your Adhara, your Buster Whelp, whatever it is, and it's going to go into your Hulk. Hulk will then summon from your from your deck or hand, a Jet Synchron. Using Jet Synchron and Crystron Hulk, you go into Auroradon, you summon 3 Mecha Phantom Beast tokens, you resummon Jet Synchron from the graveyard, and that's your level 10 Synchro into Baron de Fleur. So that's using your Crystron Hulk, your objective is Baron de Fleur. If you instead don't have a tuner monster, or if you would just rather not go into the Hulk combo, you can use 2 effect monsters to go into your Predaplant Verte Anaconda. Verte Anaconda, of course, paying 2,000 life, sending Fusion Destiny, as well as your Destiny Hero Dasher and Celestial from your deck to the graveyard, or your hand, I suppose, to the graveyard. You're going to summon DPE, which will pop 1 card in your field and your opponent's field every single turn, non-targeting, and will resummon itself during every standby phase. Celestial can also allow you to draw 2 while it's in the graveyard, as long as you have no cards in your hand, and it's at least the turn after it's been sent. So those are the 2 main engines. Now, how does that actually work and flow together? Well, if you have this guy, the Buster Whelp in your hand, as well as any of your Tenyi monsters, you're almost always going to be able to go into your Buster Lock, as well as your additional plays. So you can either go into your Verte Anaconda, or you can go into your Haki Fibrax, whichever one you deem more appropriate. For example, if you already have Fusion Destiny in your hand, well, there's no point in going into Verte Anaconda. You can end up with a board of the Buster Blader, the Buster Dragon, Baron de Fleur, and DPE, as well as any other hand traps you may have. So the deck flows together very, very, very nicely. I think a lot of people have been sort of looking at like the levels and thinking the levels on these guys are in some way relevant. They're not. While technically true, you can use your Vishuda and your Adhara or your Whelp to synchro summon out your Buster Dragon, which you can do. Bear that in mind, it is a play that will on occasion be the correct play. It again happens so rarely that it's not worth bearing in mind before going into it. That's an emergency sort of play. You would much rather use these cards to go into the likes of Hulk or Verte Anaconda. So look at these guys literally as just effect monsters that can be special summoned. Why are we playing these specific ones? Adhara, because it's a tuner. That's it, it's a tuner. Vishuda, you can play 3 Vishuda. Vishuda's actually really strong because you can use it to link summon into Monk of the Tenyi, and then you can banish this from the graveyard to bounce any of your opponent's cards back to their hand. So this guy's actually really powerful spot removal for spells and traps, like Floodgates. Really good. You know, you saw it in the gameplay, bouncing back to Flowendery's field spell, so he's really strong. These guys are simply the best of a bad bunch when it comes to the rest of the Tenyis. If your Monk of the Tenyi is destroyed, you get to resummon it. If your Monk of the Tenyi battles an opponent's monster, you get to reduce your opponent's monster by 1500. That's it. That's the only effects of these guys. Other than that, they are just effect monsters that can be special summoned. It's that simple. And yeah, honestly, that's pretty much the deck. Apart from that, it's very similar to the previous builds that we've been putting up. Again, I've described our hand trap choices, not only in this video, but I think every other video I've made since Flowendery's came out. We're playing Effect Veiler, Ash Blossom, and Imperm at 3 apiece, because not only are they really powerful hand traps, they are also specifically really powerful against Flowendery's. That's where they're at their strongest, and that's where they mean the most. So bear that in mind. These 9 cards, they can be whatever you want. Literally anything you want at all. So play whatever you want. You want to play some Lightning Storm in there, by all means, go ahead. You know, if you find yourself going second a lot, you want to play some Forbidden Droplet. I would be careful because the deck's card economy isn't that great, but again, a valid option nonetheless. And yeah, pretty much from there. The other neat little bits is the Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. If you happen to get this card into your graveyard in addition to your regular plays, you can use the Buster Dragons effect to equip this onto your fusion monster from the graveyard, and that means your opponent's locked out of their extra deck. So that's neat. 1 for 1 is going to grab you the Buster Whelp from the deck if you don't already have it, and either A, facilitate the condition of having a dragon available in your graveyard, or B, just be an extender to get an additional monster onto the field, be it your Adhara or your Whelp, just to go into one of your link plays. And it's pretty much as simple as that. It means if you've got one of these guys in your hand and it's a dead card, you can drop it. But yeah, the deck's pretty simple, honestly. Contrary to popular belief, Buster Blader is not that hard to play, but it's very hard to be good with, so do bear that in mind. It's not a simple deck. You will have to use your brain quite a bit. In terms of the extra deck is the exact same as the other videos, barring a couple of extra cards that you'll almost never use. The Buster Blader Fusion, of course, you're playing at 2 because you want to have follow-up. The Buster Dragon, of course, you're playing at 2 because you want to have follow-up, and because it's automatically destroyed at the end of the following turn of being summoned off the prologue. Your Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss can be summoned using your Buster Dragon and any of your level 1 tuners, and exists primarily to stop the Tenyi, Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign Tenyi. That's his entire reason for being here. Otherwise, your deck is no out for that card. You've Baron de Fleur for your Crystron Hacky Fibrax combo, dead simple. Link Karibo to make your Whelp a 1-card combo. You would normal summon Whelp, search for your Prologue, link summon into Link Karibo using your Whelp, and bang. Dragons in your graveyard, Prologue will send Memories and Buster Blader, full Buster Blader combo off just 1 card, as long as you have Link Karibo in your deck. This can also, I guess, be Striker Dragon, but that's more relevant in the other version of the deck. Link Karibo's better because you have the Harda here as well as your this guy. Monk of the Tenyi to facilitate additional extension with your Vishuda and your other Tenyi plays. You know, summon out 1 Tenyi, link summon into your Monk, and then you now have no effect monsters again, so you can special summon another Tenyi monster. So he's really good for extension and really good for making your Vishuda's additional effect live, because that's really powerful, as I said before. Crystron for the main combos. You have your Predaplant Verte Anaconda for main combos, Mechafat the Beast of Aurodon for your main combos. Protector Whelp, because you can extend into this guy using any 2 monsters, and he will send one of your Destruction Sword cards from your deck to the graveyard, so he can put a missing combo piece into the grave, or he can it'll be primarily be used to extend into your Dragon Buster Destruction Sword to get your extra deck lock live as well. And the last 2 cards are 2 cards you can do whatever you want with. I currently have IP Masquerena and Mech Knight Crusader Avramax, purely because they're very easily summonable in this version of the deck, and used with combination of one another, it's very, very powerful. So your IP Masquerena can be summoned using any 2 non-link monsters. Then if you link summon into Mech Knight Crusader Avramax using your IP Masquerena, your Avramax then cannot be targeted or destroyed, nor can it realistically be destroyed by battle. So it becomes a very, very powerful boss monster. It's not that difficult to pull off, because assuming you can go into Hulk or even your Predaplant Verte Anaconda and extend it just a little bit extra, and it does require a tad of extra extension, you can then just use your Verte Anaconda or your Hulk as well as your IP that satisfies the condition for Avramax. It's not a play you're going to do a lot. It is an occasional here and there type play for when you need an additional push, an additional boss monster, but it's not something you'll be doing regularly. So those 2 cards can be whatever you want. If you want to do Unicorn or something here in its place, by all means, that's just as valid an option. But yeah, that's pretty much the deck. That's all I have to say on it. I've been rambling on here for longer than I thought I was going to be. But yes, you can leave down below which of the 2 versions you think is better, which you feel is more fun, and any suggestions you have for the improvement of them, or even any other ideas going forward into the future. That's pretty much everything I have to say on it, so I'll see you all in the next one.